everyone. This is Jarrett Brown from Green Bay, Wisconsin. In a past video, when I just finished, I talked about the house that I came home to. It was a condo in Charlotte, North Carolina, or the outskirts of Charlotte near Pineville. And I talked about how I had a lot of memories from that, and those were the best memories of my life, the best years of my life there with my family. Today I'm going to talk about the house that I grew up in and all the things that happened while I was there. This is going to be a long video, but so when I was 5 years old, 1990, we moved from the Charlotte area, the outskirts of Charlotte, to Monroe, the area around Monroe, near Indian Trail, so east of Charlotte. And my dad bought a house, and it was an exciting time. I remember riding in the car with the real estate agents, all these different houses we looked at. We almost bought one in Matthews, this old house in the downtown Matthews. But we ended up not buying that. We bought this one in Indian Trail. It was a 2-story house in a neighborhood called Sandalwood. And at that time, the area where we moved to was a very rural area. It was changing. It was becoming a suburb. But there were fields everywhere that had corn and different crops that grew there. You'd see goats and cows and horses and all that stuff. But it was starting to develop. And basically this builder, he took these farms and these fields and turned them into neighborhoods. And the guy's name was Dan Moser. He built a bunch of neighborhoods in Union County. And I don't know exactly when he started and when he stopped, but in the 90s I know he did quite a lot. But he built our neighborhood, and our neighborhood was called Sandalwood. It was a very simple neighborhood. It had 4 streets, I think. But we lived, if you would go into the neighborhood and go about halfway into it, we lived on the corner of the main street, which was called Devon Drive, and the street called Darby Drive. We lived on the corner lot. And our house still is, it had one full story downstairs, and then you would go upstairs, and it had another story that was basically part of the roof. So it was built like that. And we had dormers where you could go out and go into the dormer and then look out the window. But it was exciting to move into this house because it was much bigger than the condo that we had been living in, and there was 3 kids, so we needed space to run around and have a good time. I remember running up and down the stairs when we first got there. We thought that was cool, sliding down the stairs and climbing on we had a banister. We would climb on the banister and hang off that and climb up the stairs a little bit and then jump off, holding the banister. So it was me and my dad, my mom, my brother and sister, and we had a yard for the first time that was just for us, you know. And we could look out of the kitchen window and see a silo, grain silos, and different little buildings that this farm had. But it was all in a big field, and there was a lake that was kind of far away, but we could almost see it, could at least see where the trees were that were close to this lake. And eventually those silos got knocked down and they replaced it with a school called Shiloh Elementary School. And the first school that I ever went to was called Shiloh Elementary School, but it became the old Shiloh, and the one that was built right beside our house, was called the New Shiloh. and that's where I went to first grade. But our neighborhood, it was small, but there were a lot of young people living there, and these young people had kids, most of them. So there were a lot of kids running around, and I remember um, probably the people that we probably met first was this family called the Hudsons. It was Don Hudson, and then he had a wife named Tammy, who's still my friend, and Jamil and Donald, and eventually they had another baby, and her name was Katie. Is Katie. But we used to play at their house a lot, and they would come over and play at our house. And we had some neighbors down that lived in the cul-de-sac named Evan and Aaron Murray. Their dad was a former musician, and he had these Volkswagen vans, truck. What do you call these things? Volkswagen, old Volkswagens. I guess he used to drive around in when he was a musician, but he had those in the backyard. Bus is what they're called, Volkswagen bus. Not really a bus, it's a van, but they call it a bus. He had those in his backyard, so we played with them a lot. And then over time, different families came and went. I had a good friend who lived in the back of the neighborhood. His name was Kevin Steele, and we became friends very quickly. But we went to, we were in the same class in first grade, so we started hanging out a lot then. And we would wrestle a lot. We'd run around a lot, play football, play basketball, play baseball, every sport we'd play. And we would go on these trails that they had at the very back of the neighborhood, kind of where behind Sun Valley Middle School and Sun Valley High School. They called them the cross-country trails because the cross-country running team practiced there. They ran around the trails to get their miles in. But we would go back there and play, ride our bikes, play in the creek, play in the on these little hills they had, running through the brush. They had all kinds of things. There was certain times of year you could find honeysuckles back there and different kinds of berries and stuff that we would eat. But yeah, so we had plenty of room to roam back there. Another family that we knew really well was the Lowe's. It was William and Annette and Christopher and Stephen. And William, he was really good friends with my dad because they both liked electronics. William, he ran this small electronic shop where he repaired electronics. And my dad liked electronics, so they like to talk about that a lot. But we would go over to Chris's house. Chris, being one of the boys, the older one, he had Nintendo, which was amazing to us because we didn't have that. But they had it, so we would go over there and play Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and all these things. I think they had a baseball game we used to play. There was a boxing game, maybe called Knockout, basketball game. But we had a lot of fun playing those games over there. And we would run around the neighborhood too and play in their backyard. They had a fenced-in backyard, and they had some dogs called Whippets that would run around real fast. They would run around real fast. But I remember one time Chris, he got sick. He had some problem with his tonsils, and he had to get them removed. And I remember going out there and seeing him laid in the bed. But Chris, he was a cool kid. He ended up becoming a chemist. I think he has a PhD from North Carolina State, I think. But he was a really, really smart guy. And his brother Stephen was my friend because he was my age. He was in my kindergarten class, and we played around a lot, and I was always nice to him. And he was a good person. He was slightly awkward, but he was a good person. He was cool. He was cool to me. And but we had a lot of fun playing back then. Making like, I remember one time we took these big boxes and made a fort, and they had like a bonus room. Made one in there. William, the dad, he used to call me Smiley. He was one of several people who used to call me Smiley when I was a kid because I used to always run around and I was always smiling, laughing. And so he used to call me that. And Tammy, the neighbor down the street that I mentioned, one of the first people that we met, she used to call me that. She still calls me that. And I'm 37, and I don't smile quite so much anymore. But she still calls me that because she did when I was a kid. And I remember when I was a kid, Tammy, my mom, and all of us kids, we went for a walk through the neighborhood, and we saw this mailbox that had been vandalized and knocked off, and I think somebody had spray painted it or something. But the reason those people did that is because the people who moved in there were foreigners. They were Polish people, and they were the Kepkas. You had Raphael, I forget the mom's name, and then you had Hubert and David. They were the kids, Hubert and David. Well, Hubert, he was a year younger than me, and David was 2 years, I think, younger than me. But Hubert became a really good friend of mine. We used to play basketball with this little hoop that he had on his driveway. We used to go over to his backyard and play soccer because Europeans, played a lot of soccer. And eventually he got video games at some point, and we'd go over there and play with them. His mother and his dad, they couldn't speak English very well at first. My first memories of them, I remember going over, knocking on the door, look for Hubert, say, "Is Hubert home?" And they say, "Hubert is outside." And they say, "No," or "Yes." And that was it. They couldn't explain much more. But they eventually ended up learning English, and they speak English like everybody else now. But I remember one time, it was terrible. I went over to Hubert's house, and I found out that Hubert's dad, Raphael, had been in an accident, and he had been hit in the head with something at his workplace, and he had to have all kinds of surgeries, and it took him a really long time to come back from it, but eventually he came back. He was an engineer, still is probably. Really smart guy. He used to work at a factory, manufacturing plant. Genwolf, I think it was called. But he worked at this manufacturing plant. He was gone a lot because he worked a lot. But his mom was almost always home. She had some jobs where she cleaned during the day, but in the afternoon, whenever the kids were home, she was there. But some things I remember is from their house is that one time the dad, Raphael, and his brother, they built a deck in the back of the house, and all of us kids, neighborhood kids, came over and helped them. They probably didn't want our help or need it, but we helped them anyway. And another time they were putting in tile. I knew how to do tile a little bit because my family has always done it since 1952. But I remember them doing that. But one good thing I liked about their house was they always had food, a lot of food. And they always had these big bottles of Pepsi and Mountain Dew and all that. That was great when we go over there. They would give us something to drink. But I remember doing a project when I was in 5th grade about Poland. And since I had Polish friends, I went over to their house and they showed me different books and they helped me find the information I needed for my project, so that was cool. And they would always speak Polish to each other, the mom to the kids, so the kids learned Polish. And they were Catholics. We didn't have any Catholics there in North Carolina where I live, but they were Catholics, and so they would go to church, this church called St. John Newman, and they would go there all the time, and that was a really big important part of their life. So, but a lot of times they would be going to church, and so they couldn't play. A lot of times we went to church, and so we couldn't play, but we went to a different church. But Hubert and David both, they grew up. Hubert went to college. He was going to become a state trooper at one point, but he studied criminal justice. But he ended up not becoming a state trooper, and he actually ended up becoming a drug addict. And his little brother David, who used to follow him everywhere, David followed Hubert everywhere, around the neighborhood and stuff. As kids, they became drug addicts together. And I don't know all the details about what drugs they were doing or anything like that, but they were doing a lot of drugs. And Hubert called me a couple of times, or contacted me on Facebook a couple of times, asking for money, because he was sleeping in the car, and he was just trying to get more drugs. And I didn't give him any. But eventually, they went to California, and they did different things. But one night, a few years ago, David died because of a drug overdose. And that was really hard for Hubert. Hubert couldn't communicate. He still doesn't talk about it, as far as I know. And but Hubert, I think, ended up getting off drugs, and he went over and lived in Poland with his dad's family, his mom's family. And he just created a new life because it was so hard for him to lose his brother. But it was terrible that they got on drugs. But the thing that I remember about them is playing with them, and going over to their house and learning about them, and just having experiences with them. We used to go down to these woods that were kind of in a cul-de-sac near their house. We would play in there, and they had a creek in there, and sometimes it would flood. So especially when it flooded, we went down there and played in the water. There was like this pipe that went through the woods, and we would climb on the pipe, and the pipe had poison ivy all over it. And we got, me, Hubert, and this other kid, Kevin, that I mentioned earlier, we all got poison ivy at the same time, and I got it so bad that my eyes were swollen shut and my face was puffy, and I couldn't go to school for a few days. And it was terrible. It was like I could still feel what the poison ivy felt like, the rash that I got from it, what that felt like on my face. It was very heavy, and it was very dry. It was terrible, but they like to make fun of me, even though they got it too, but I got it worse. But I remember, like, there was a vine in that little area of woods that we would swing on. There was a tree that we turned into a fort. We took all these pieces of wood from construction sites, because the area was still kind of being built. Some houses were being built in the area. So we would go in the construction sites and take shit. It probably wasn't ours, but we probably shouldn't have been taking. A lot of it was trash, but some of it probably wasn't. There were like nails and stuff that we found. There were a lot of pieces of wood and different stuff. But we would take that and build forts, and that was always fun. I'm just glad nobody got hurt on any of our forts, because we put them up kind of high, and we weren't great craftsmen or great carpenters or anything, so glad nobody got hurt. There was one guy I forgot to mention I forgot to mention a few people, but these kids named Dan and Hale Hoflink, they moved into our neighborhood, and they were originally, I think, from Louisiana, but they moved in, and they became our friends. And I remember they had in their backyard, they had a sand area, and they had this fort built on it that had like swings and stuff and slide, and not like a homemade fort, like a play area that you buy. It was really nice, and they had a what do you call this thing? It's a big pole, and it has a volleyball attached to a string on the pole. Had one of those. But one day we were building something in Dan's backyard with the stuff that we took from some construction site, and he got a nail in his foot, and that was terrible. That was nasty. I still remember seeing that. But we see Dan. He was kind of a high-strung guy, and we got in a lot of arguments and fights with him and stuff. They were our friends, but we got in a lot of arguments and fights with them. I remember one time, I don't know how old I was, I think I was probably 10. Hale was a little younger. I think he was maybe a year or two younger. Well, he sees me walking across the yard of this family that lived in front of our family. Actually, I don't know if that family was living there at that point, but this house in front of where we lived. I was walking through their yard, going to the back of the neighborhood, and Hale, he comes up to me with this super soaker, super soaker, and it had a water pack on it, and it was like a heavy duty gun, water gun, and I was eating these gummy sharks, and he shot me right in the face, and I was pissed off. So first thing I did, I went over there and I just started beating the hell out of him. And I beat him pretty good. And he never did that again, I'll tell you that. But the police came because of that. And eventually I had to go downtown with my mom, downtown Monroe, and meet this lady. I think she was some sort of youth magistrate, judge, lady or something. Or maybe a prosecutor. I don't know. But what I do know is they took me in this room, met this lady sitting across the desk from her, and she asked me to tell her what happened. And the way I remember it and the way I told her was that he'd hit me with a gun. And I don't know if he hit me with the gun now. But that's the way I told her back then. So he hit me with the gun, so I beat him up because it was self-defense. And she, this lady, who was going to decide if I got charged with an offense, she said, "Are you sure that's what happened? He hit you with a gun?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Because the reason I keep asking you, are you sure, is because I have video evidence that you weren't hit with a gun, that you were just shot in the face with water." And I said, "Oh, well, that's not true because he hit me with the gun." And my mom told this lady, she said, "If you have video evidence, we need to see it. Otherwise, you need to take my son at his word." And shortly thereafter, the woman said, "Okay, Miss Brown," my mom's name is Miss Brown, Terry. "Okay, Miss Brown, you all can go home. We don't have anything further to discuss." And so I didn't get in trouble. I didn't have to go to court or anything like that. But I think that they just lied because it was known that, or it was rumored that the mom, Dan Hill's mom, her name was Nancy, she used to videotape things from the window. We don't know if that's true, but we think that's true. That's what a rumor was. And so there was a rumor that she had videotaped this incident of him coming up to me and then beating him up. But I don't think that they actually had any evidence at all, which was good, especially if I did what they accused me of. But yes, that was funny. But Dan, and his dad was real smart. I don't know what his dad was. I think maybe an engineer, because we used to go over to his house and they had this big box of popsicle sticks, and we would build all kinds of things with the popsicle sticks and glue. That was always fun. But one time, me and Dan, the older one, we got in an argument. He was like a year older than me. We got in an argument and a fight, and I did what I did. I beat him up pretty good, from what I remember. And his dad, named Richard, he came down the street to our house, knocked on the door. My mom was watching soap operas, or Oprah or something, and she came to the door and he started yelling at her, and the way I remember it is that she slapped him and he went back down the street because he got in her face. He was real physical, and he was a tall man, but the way I remember is that she slapped him, or if she didn't slap him, she made him feel like he got slapped. She really went after him. He went back down that street, never came again. She wasn't gonna allow this man to come down here looking for me, and yeah. But there was always something going on with them. But they were good people. We were good people. It was just like, kids, they get in skirmishes and disagreements and stuff, and I don't hold it against them. They don't hold it against us, we hope. But I remember there was this other kid. He lived past where Hubert lived, but I think his name was Trent, or Trace, or Trey, or something. But he had a bowl cut. And so one time he came home and he got off the bus. He went to a different school than me, even though we lived in the same neighborhood. But he got off the bus, and this other kid named Ricky, bigger kid who was in middle school at that time, he came and he grabbed this guy Trent, or Trey, or Trace. He grabbed him, and I went up and I was kicking Trace because he couldn't fight back. It wasn't fair, but that's what happened. I was kicking him and hitting him, and then Trace cried, and he went home and told his dad, and his dad came down, and the same. I was laying on the couch watching the news, and dad came down. He looking for me. My mom went to the door. The man got in my mom's face, and my mom got in his face, and that man turned around and went back home. That was it. So my mom, she was a preschool teacher. This is not a fighter, but she defended her kids, And one more incident I got into when I was a kid. One time I was playing at this construction site, and out in front of the construction site they had dug a deep hole to where they were going to attach the water pipe for the house to the city water, I think, or it was some kind of sewer or something. But anyway, they had this big hole, and I was down in the hole. And Nancy, Dan and Hill's mom, the one I mentioned a minute ago, she called the police on me. So here I was, I'm like an 8-year-old kid, and down in this hole, and the police come, and they start questioning me, asking me questions. What are you doing here? Where do you live? Why are you here? Trying to figure out if I had broken some law or something, other than maybe trespass. But they did all this questioning without my mom being present. And I remember I walked back to my house, and they came with me and knocked on the door, and they knocked on the door. And I was standing there with them. And I don't know why we didn't just walk in, because I could walk in my house. But they had knocked on the door, and my mom came out. My mom, she yelled at these police officers. She said, "That's my son. You have no right to talk to my son without me present. If he did something wrong, you come talk to me about it, and we'll figure it out, and we'll work it out." And those cops said, "Hey, I'm sorry, Miss Brown. We were just responding to a call. We wanted to make sure that he wasn't doing anything he wasn't supposed to be doing, that he was safe. and you shouldn't be playing in that hole because it's dangerous, and the ground could collapse and he could get stuck in there or something. But they got scared because she let him have it. I mean, she gave him hell, and they left. The police left, and I didn't get in trouble. That was good. But yeah, this kid Ricky that I mentioned, he was a bigger kid. He was an older kid, and I think he was in middle school when he moved in. But all the neighborhood kids used to go in a lot of times in my yard play football. And one time I remember trying to tackle Ricky, and I made the mistake of trying to tackle him up high around his neck. I put my arms around his neck, and he slung me off, and I landed on my head. And I was like, if I ever had a concussion, that's when that must have been when. Because I remember just like being confused and pain. Not really pain, but just like my head just did not feel good. But yeah, he could be pretty rough. But yeah, we all were really rough, and we tackled each other. We played only tackle football. We didn't play two-hand touch unless we were playing in the street. But we played tackle football. We just nail each other. All the neighborhood kids. Kevin, the one I mentioned, that was my friend. This guy Junior Johnson, I didn't mention him. His name was Samuel Johnson, but everybody called him Junior because his dad was Samuel Johnson too. And Alex actually ended up playing football in college. But Alex was younger than me by a couple of years, but he was really, really big. Even when we were kids, he ended up being a defensive lineman in college at North Carolina Central, I think. But we'd all play football in either at my yard or across the street where Junior lived in his backyard, and his neighbor's backyard was Jack. Just call him Fat Jack because he was fat and his name was Jack. We'd play in their yard, and Jack, he was fat, but like he had a dog, and his dog was named after Bojangles restaurant. Bojangles, that was named Bojangles. But yes, we would play over there. A lot of roughness, a lot of tackling and hitting. And I think Junior also ended up playing college football, but only for a year for this college, Greensboro College, I think, which is like not even D3. I think it was like NAIA or something. But he played for a little bit. And but yeah, it's just a wonder that nobody ever got hurt when we played. It's so rough. But we played all the sports. We played basketball, baseball, soccer, football, anything that had a ball involved or was competitive, we played it. Played a lot of basketball in the street. I remember Jack, he had a basketball hoop that he could roll to the street. We would play there and shoot. Played a lot of games at 21 and horse and all that. And in my backyard, we had a basketball hoop too. And we wore out the grass, and it just turned into dirt. And you could see, the area of the lane in front of the hoop where it got a lot of traffic. The the grass just disappeared. But I remember spending seemed like every day out there at night a lot of times because we had a light on the back porch that you could use to see a little bit. But I remember a lot of times going out there playing by myself, just practicing, pretending like I was the great players of that time. Charlotte Hornets like Lonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson and Muggsy Bogues and Del Curry. And also these basketball players that I would see on TV on NBC, like Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson and Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing, all these guys. I just love basketball. I remember from the time that I was old enough to shoot, which was probably kindergarten or a little bit before, um, just always playing basketball and always having a basketball. I like all the sports, but I like basketball the most. Um, and I remember a lot of times, and I actually just sent someone a message about this. Um, but when I was a kid and I lived in that house, I was a fan of the UNC Tar Heels. Still am today. I've been a fan my whole life, as far as I can remember. But in that time, the early '90s, the Tar Heels were really good, and the only way I could hear most of the games or see them was through the radio, because I had a brother and sister and they didn't like sports, so they were watching cartoons or whatever they liked, and we only had one TV, and it didn't have cable. So the best way for me to follow the Tar Heels was to listen to them on the radio, and their games came on WBT. So I would go in my room a lot of times, at night or on Saturday afternoons, and listen to Woody Durham and Mick Mixon call the games. And I remember the team that won the championship in 1993 with George Lynch and Eric Montross on it. I actually sent a postcard to Eric Montross recently, because he has cancer now and he sounds like he's dying of it. But I sent him a postcard to tell him about my memories and to wish him well in his fight against cancer. But some of the best memories that I have as a kid were listening to the radio of the Tar Heels playing basketball. And I actually, when Mick Mixon retired from broadcasting, after working for the Tar Heels Sports Network for a long time, he worked for the Carolina Panthers football team as a broadcaster, and I sent him a letter when he retired, postcard, saying, congratulations on your retirement, have a good life. Thanks for the memories. Thanks for all those good memories that I had as a kid, listening to him and Woody Durham. And he sent me back actually an email, because his wife figured out who I was and where I lived and stuff, and my Facebook, and he sent me actually an email to my personal email address, and it said, hey, my wife figured out who you were, and I wanted to send you a letter, send you an email to thank you for sending me that nice postcard and all that. And so that was cool. And I still have a picture of me in a Carolina basketball jersey, not official, but like one of the knockoff brands that we got from Kmart or somewhere, maybe Walmart. But I still have that, and me holding the basketball, and my brother beside him holding the basketball, even though he didn't really play. But yeah, when we started getting older, we would go to different neighborhoods, and the kids from our neighborhood would go play sports against the kids in other neighborhoods. There was this neighborhood called Meadow Glen, and there was another one called Clover Bend. We would go play different kids and all that. One thing that I remember really well is that one summer, there was this guy. His name was Lonnie Riley, and his his wife used to be a substitute at the school, and he had 2 kids. Both of them went to our school, Shiloh. But Lonnie Riley, he was a preacher. He was a pastor, and he was always starting churches. And one time he started a church before they had a building, but they held the Vacation Bible School in the front yard of Chris's house, the Lowe's. So it was kind of near where I lived, a couple houses down, across the street and a couple houses down. But they used these, what do they call these things? These wooden round things that they wrap wire around. Uh, but they used those and they turned them on their side so we would have like little tables. So we sat around a table and did crafts and drawings and made these little things and all that. And yeah, and we would go over to this other neighborhood where the Rileys lived. Lonnie Riley lived, and I think we had some church stuff over there one time. And then one time he managed to either rent or somehow be allowed to hold church in a movie theater, in the Monroe movie theater. So we went to his church services at the movie theater. But crazy thing about that whole experience growing up, visiting his churches and participating in their activities and stuff, didn't actually ever have a real church building as far as I know. But he ended up cheating on his wife and getting married to someone else. So that's just how it goes, I guess. But one of his kids, I think, was Jason Riley. And but they were a good family. They were nice people. Sad what happened with him cheating on his wife, but that happens. And but yeah, we had other a lot of other people come and go through the neighborhood. There was this family called the Browns that actually lived at the very front of the neighborhood, and they lived on a corner. And their dad, his name was Keith, and he was a plumber. But Keith, he had a drinking problem. he was a nice guy, but he had a drinking problem, and he used to get drunk all the time. And but he liked to have his house like have displays at his house whenever there was a holiday, Halloween or whatever, Thanksgiving, Christmas. He would go all out to like decorate the front of the house and all that. But they were originally from Wisconsin, where I live now, and they were big Green Bay Packers fans. And I remember when the Packers won, Keith, he would be very drunk, but he would be either driving his van up and down the street, honking the horn, or he would be hanging out the side of the window, or the side of the side door, yelling, "Go Packers, go Packers, go Packers!" And he would be drunk, and but he was just having a good time. Hopefully, glad nobody got hurt. Well, whoever was driving was drunk, but I still remember that. And they always had Christmas lights, and they had Packers signs and everything, and that was odd because everybody in my neighborhood was Carolina Panthers fan because that was a new team and everybody was excited about it in Charlotte. But he was really happy when the Packers beat the Panthers in the whatever year that was, 1997, 1996 playoffs and the conference championship. They beat them up here at Green Bay, and he was real happy about that. But yeah, but Jason Brown, the kid, he lived with the secret. You see, in our neighborhood, all the guys like girls and all the girls like guys. That's just the way it was back then. And even if you were different than that, you didn't say it. And that's sad, but it's true. So people got picked on if they were accused of being different, or if there actually were. And I think there were some suspicions that Jason was gay. And I think people maybe picked on him a little bit, but nobody knew. But later on we found out, like when he became an adult, we found out that he was. But he's still my friend today, and I think he's happy. At least I hope so. And so that's good for him. But there was a friend I mentioned, Junior Johnson, Sam, and his brother Alex. They were African American kids. They were black kids, and their mom worked all the time, and their dad didn't live in the house. He got separated from his mom, and I only saw his dad a couple of times. But for a while, his mom was either in a relationship or married to this man named Herbert. I think his name was Herbert. And he was a real big black guy, big old muscles. He used to wear tank tops, and he drove this little blue truck, I think it was. Datsun, D-A-T-S-U-N. But after he left, he stopped living with Junior and Alex's mom. His mom was a single mother, and she worked all the time, and she came home really late a lot of times. And so Junior would have to take care of his brother, make sure they did their homework and all that, and he would have to clean the house because his mom wanted the house clean when she came home. She wanted food and stuff too. But they had a trampoline in their backyard that they got one Christmas, and we used to always go jumping up and down on that thing. And that was one of the hangout spots because we could just all sit on the trampoline and talk or play games. Throw footballs to whoever's jumping on the trampoline that they catch it. But I remember I stayed over at Junior's house a couple of times because he invited me for a sleepover. So go over there and play video games. I think by that point they had Super Nintendo instead of just the regular Nintendo. Or maybe he had Sega, I don't know. But eventually he got Nintendo 64, or PlayStation. Probably PlayStation. But we'd go over there and play games and stuff, and I like Junior because he liked sports, and he played football, a lot of football. And he ended up being on my 7th grade football team. He wasn't as good as he thought he was. Wasn't as good as he thought he was going to be, but he was on the team. The thing about him was that he was a powder. So if he didn't get his way, or he didn't do as well as he thought he was going to do, or he didn't get to play the position he wanted, he didn't get the number he wanted, or whatever, he was just a powder. And he would always say that he was hurt when he wasn't really hurt. He just, he just needed a little time to pout. But he was cool. We used to walk up and watch the high school games when we were in middle school, and so we both liked sports, and that was fun. We had these people who, one of them, his name was Chris, who lived beside Chris Lowe that I had mentioned. But this guy's name was Chris, and he was friends with this guy named Clay who lived on my street. And Clay and Chris both, they liked skateboarding. They used to always skateboard and take their skateboards and jump over things and do tricks and stuff. And they were older than me by, 4 or 5 years. But one time I remember they went out the window of Chris's house onto his roof. And then they jumped off the roof. That was crazy. And, one thing I remember about that, Chris, was that one time me and Dan's the brother of that kid that I beat up. I beat Dan up too, but that's a kid that I almost got in trouble for beating up. Well, they lived across from Chris, and one time Dan and me and a couple other people, we were making a club under this trailer that was used to store construction materials. And we were making it under there, and we had carpet, and we we had walls, and we had everything. And Dan made a sign for our club, and he wrote club on it. But the problem was that he, instead of writing a B, he wrote a D backwards. So a B faces forward and a D goes back. And he wrote Clud. And Chris came up to Dan, we were probably 6 years old, 5 years old. Came up to Dan and said, "Hey Dan, can I be in your Clud?" And that's still funny. But yeah. But our next door neighbors were this couple who was older, and they're African American, but they were, I think, mixed with Native American, and I think originally they were from Minnesota, but they had these Jeeps with the wood panels on the side, and but the thing about them was, since they're older, they don't want nobody in their yard. And we were kids, we were always cutting through their yard and stuff like that. The ball would go over the fence, and we'd climb over the fence and get it, and they'd say, "Hey, get out of my yard." Or, "Stop throwing the ball over here," and they would throw the ball back. And sometimes they wouldn't throw the ball back, they wouldn't give it to us. Have to send mom and dad over there to get it. But yeah, he, man, I forget his name for some reason. I'll remember eventually. But the woman, her name was Roberta. And Roberta, she was a short lady, but she used to walk around the neighborhood, all the streets, every day. Sometimes several times a day. In the morning and at night. She was trying to live healthy, But I think by now they're both gone for sure. I remember when the man died. But they had two granddaughters who ended up moving to our neighborhood later on. They were Kia and Keisha Lacato, and they were twins. And a lot of people couldn't tell them apart, but those of us who knew them could. My parents couldn't, but the kids, we all could. We figured them out. Figured out which was which. But yeah, they became our friends. I remember one time we were building a fort in the woods back there, past where Hubert lives, on the main street. At the very end, there was woods where we always played, and we were building a fort. And Kia and Keisha were there, and they were helping us. And I was saying something about that we were going to put a window in. And Kia didn't understand that we were going to put a window in for some reason. But I remember Keisha saying, "The window, Kia, the window." And and I don't know why, but that just sticks in my brain for all these years. It was kind of funny. But one thing I didn't mention when I was first talking about moving to the neighborhood is that our friends, the Hudsons, Jamil and Donald, they, their dad, he liked racing. And his favorite driver was Dale Earnhardt, and that became Donald and Jamil's favorite driver. But we would take our bikes and ride up and down the street and do a lot of laps. A lot. I don't remember how many hundreds of laps, maybe 500. A lot. And we would do full races, and everybody would pretend like they were a race car driver even though we were on bicycles. But Jamil, he liked to be Dale Earnhardt. My brother, he liked to be Jeff Gordon. And I think I was Kyle Petty a lot, or maybe Richard Petty. I don't think we had a Rusty Wallace. Nobody liked Rusty Wallace. But we raced a lot. And those are good memories. And I remember we used to put baseball cards. We didn't do this very often, and I'm glad, because destroy the baseball cards. But we put the baseball cards in and the tire to make a sound. But yeah, we ran a lot of miles on our bikes. It was like that my whole childhood. As soon as I got out of school, I got on my bike and went to go find my friends. And usually the way that I could find my friends was that there was a whole bunch of bikes somewhere in front of somebody's house or at a, somewhere in a field or whatever, or at the church that was kind of near where we lived, or at the school. There was a whole bunch of bikes, and that's how you knew where everybody was at. But we rode ours a lot. I had a gold or brown Roadmaster. That was the first bike that I really remember. The little bike when I was like in first grade and second grade. And then one night, my dad brought home a bike for me that had been given to him by one of his customers, and it was a blue bike. I can't remember the brand, but I actually saw the brand recently on Facebook. Somebody said, if you're from the 1980s, you had this bike. And I was like, yeah, I did have that bike. But then one time, what was that? On Christmas, we opened up all our presents that Santa brought, and later on in that day, my dad said, hey, we need to go to the store. You want to go with me, Jared? I want to go to Kmart. So we went to Kmart and we looked at tools. And when I say we looked at them, We didn't buy them. Because that's what we did a lot of times. We just go look at tools, see what they got. We didn't have money to buy anything, but we could look. And so me and my dad, we went and we looked at tools. And then he took me to the bike aisle. And he said, hey, Jared, how about this bike? It was a blue bike, and it was perfect for my size. I can't remember if it was a Huffy or if it was a Roadmaster or what it was, but it was a cool bike. And I said, I like this bike. And he said, well, guess what? It's yours. I'm going to buy it. And that was surprising because my dad didn't have a lot of money. And at the time, ever really. But he bought me that bike, and I remember riding that thing everywhere. That was fun. One story about when I was actually learning how to ride a bike is I had that little Roadmaster that I mentioned, the one that was like brown or whatever color that was. And I was first learning, so I took off on my own, and I kind of lost control of it, and I slammed into this car that the guy who used to live across the street from us, his name was Mike. Mike and Debbie, and they had a couple little girls. But Mike had these big metal cars, and one of them was a Chevelle, and it was black or blue. But he parked it on the street, and I slammed right into it, and damn, that thing was hard. I didn't bounce off. But I mean, there were probably a lot of bike accidents in those days, but luckily none of them were bad. Not so bad that we got broken arms, broken legs, broken this, broken that. We just usually got skinned up a little bit. And then we'd just jump right back on the bike and keep going. But bikes were always a part of what we did. We liked bikes. I remember we used to take some of those construction materials from those houses that were being built, and we would create ramps, take a few pieces of wood, stack them up, and then take a longer piece of plywood and make a ramp, and then take ride the bike up the ramp, and go a few feet up in the air, and then come down, see how far you could go, or how high you could go to. Or jump from one ramp to another. One thing that was bad is one time I was going up a ramp and the plywood broke, so I didn't get to fly. I just boom hit the ground and then wrecked. It was bad. But I have a cool picture of my brother when we were kids. He liked to skate rollerblades, and he jumped. He rode rollerblades and he used one of those ramps to jump through the air, and he kicked his feet up and flew a little bit and then landed on the ground. And probably did a turn or something. But yeah, a lot of those kids, older ones especially, they like rollerblades. So it was Ricky, the big kid that I mentioned that threw me on the ground the one time. It was my brother, a couple other ones that would rollerblade a lot. And I remember we tried to play hockey on skates, but our games weren't very good. And I don't think we had the skating skills, to be able to play hockey very well on skates, but we tried. I think a lot of times we just played street hockey because it's easier. You're just in your shoes, you know. So we played a lot of that, but yeah. So we're almost at an hour. I've been talking for an hour about my childhood friends in the neighborhood that I grew up in, Sandalwood in Indian Trail, North Carolina. A lot of the people I mentioned are people that I was friend with, and some of them are still my friends. I'm still connected to them. Some of them have passed away or moved away and just lost contact, but most of them are people that I still know. Speaking of people who passed away, we had a guy who lives in the neighborhood for a short time. His name was David Guest. And he was a little older than me, but we used to go over to his house, and he was at home alone a lot because his mom was busy working. And we used to go in his shed and play with fire, like light candles and burn stuff and do all that. And luckily we never burned anything down. Another thing we did, I think the first time I ever saw a nude magazine was at his house. He shared it with us and showed us. But yeah, one day he was over at this other kid's house named Patrick. Patrick and Danielle. They moved from real close to where I lived to a little farther into the neighborhood, and they lived on this corner, kind of near where Hubert lived. But one day, me and Patrick, and David, and Hubert, and a couple other people were playing at Patrick's house, and these kids, big kids, they were high school kids. They came up, and for some reason, they decided to beat up our friend David Guest, and they beat him up really bad. And they picked him up. One of them picked him up, and the other one had his knee, and they broke him across the knee, landed his back on the knee, and we thought he broke his back, and he could have, but he didn't. But like the paramedics came, and he went to the hospital, and everybody was really scared because it was really bad what those guys did. I mean, they beat the hell out of him, and then they could have killed him, but he didn't die. And he went to the hospital, and then I think he came home the next day or something like that, and he was all right, and he was able to walk again and stuff. But I first actually met him because he was bouncing a ball down the street, and I was in my room upstairs, probably listening to the Tar Heels game like I was telling you about, and I heard him bouncing the ball, so I opened the window, I looked down, and I see him, and I said, "Hey, who are you?" He said, "I'm David." I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "I'm from South Africa." I said, "South Africa?" Yeah, he had been living in South Africa, or a country near South Africa. What was that country? Because his mom, and I think when she was married to his dad, they were missionaries or something, or doing business there. I think missionaries. But anyway, so he had lived in South Africa as a kid, but he moved to where we lived, and he became our friend for the time that we knew him. But unfortunately, when I was in high school, he died. I can't remember exactly how he died, but I think it had something to do with drugs. Yeah, he died, unfortunately. But he was a nice kid. We had a lot of fun with him while he was around. But it's just sad that, a kid that young died the way he did. And he had his whole future ahead of him and all that, but, passed away too soon. And different things like that have happened to other people in the neighborhood, kids that were just innocent kids when I knew them. They grew up and they ended up in jail, or they ended up, dying. Like David, the other David that I mentioned, Hubert's brother. We used to call him Little David because Big David was David Guest, but Little David, he died of drugs. But all the kids in that neighborhood should have had a good future, but some of them didn't make it that far because they got in trouble or because they died. And that's sad, but I guess that's part of life. One thing that just came to my mind was the fact that we had most of the people that I mentioned just now over the last hour and 5 minutes are guys, boys. But we had girls in the neighborhood too. And when I was little, we didn't like the girls, because we were dumb that way. And there was a bunch of girls that lived in the back of the neighborhood. They were these girls that were, their last name was Freeze. There was a whole bunch of them. There was Amy, Jennifer, and Katie, and what was the oldest one's name? Can't remember her name. But can't remember her name. But she was older. We didn't see her very much. And there was this girl, Heather McCorder, and there was this girl, Summer, and her sister, Mickey. And we used to say, oh, the girls are so bad, and go back there. We didn't fight them or anything, but but we used to have little arguments and stuff with them. Say, oh, you're the girl, yuck, But they were all, they all grew up, all those girls grew up to be like nice looking women, very attractive. And all the Freeze girls, they grew up to become nurses and teachers and stuff. And so they ended up all right. But yeah, I thought I should mention the girls since I talked so much about these kids that were guys that were my friends. But yeah. Anyway, so that's a lot of stories about the neighborhood that I grew up in, the house that I moved to, and I was in kindergarten, 1990, and I lived in until I was 7th grade. And then I left for a year, because I'll tell that story later, but I left for a year, left my family for a year, then I came back for another year, and then after 9th grade, I was gone. And but I spent, that, what's that, 7, 8, maybe almost 9 years total together at that house. And so we had, while I was there, we met a lot of people. So there was a lot of kids around and made a lot of memories, and yeah, so that's what I had. I made a previous video about the house that I lived in after I was born, and that house had the best memories of my life, because I was at home with my mom a lot. then after that was this house, because this was my childhood house where I was a kid and I could really run around and play and interact with other kids, and I learned to play sports and I did all that. So that was a great place to. Um, but yeah, so that neighborhood had a lot of memories for me. It still does, and it's a place that kind of is a part of who I am, because it's where I grew up and I learned so many things. And so that's all for that. That's everything that, not everything, but that's what I can remember right at the moment about Sandalwood and Indian Trail in North Carolina, outside of Charlotte, east of Charlotte. That's my childhood there. I hope that all my friends and all the people that I knew growing up are living good lives now, and they're happy, and they have families of their own. A lot of them do, and I hope that they have good lives. So, thanks for listening.